What if I told you that some of the biggest black legends you admire weren't just chasing success, they were quietly fighting a war with drugs that nearly tore their lives apart? The world saw the shine, the hits, the red carpets, and the smiles. What you didn't see was the slow, brutal fall behind the scenes, the cravings, the cover-ups, the moments when high fame couldn't hide how far they'd slipped. So, how did legends become trapped, and what broke them? You won't believe how close some came to losing everything and what happened when the spotlight finally flickered on their secret struggle. 10. Michael Jackson, the king of pop's public image, as a gentle, childlike entertainer, masked a devastating private battle with prescription drug addiction that would ultimately claim his life. Jackson's dependency began innocently enough during the 1980s when he suffered burns filming a Pepsi commercial, leading to legitimate pain medication. However, what started as a medical necessity evolved into a dangerous reliance on powerful substances, including Demerol, lorazepam, and eventually propofol, a surgical anesthetic he used to achieve sleep. His addiction intensified as the pressures of fame, legal troubles, and physical pain from multiple surgeries created a perfect storm of vulnerability. Jackson's physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, became complicit in feeding this addiction, administering dangerous combinations of drugs in non-medical settings. The pop icon's tolerance grew so severe that he required increasingly potent substances to function, creating a cycle that isolated him from family and friends. On June 25, 2009, this tragic dependency reached its inevitable conclusion when Jackson died from acute propofol and benzodiazepine intoxication in his Holmby Hills mansion. His death shocked the world and highlighted how prescription drug addiction could destroy even the most successful individuals, leaving behind a complicated legacy of unparalleled musical genius, overshadowed by the demons that consumed his final years. 9. Rick James. Rick James embodied the excesses of 1980s celebrity culture, but his flamboyant persona concealed a destructive relationship with drugs that would ultimately destroy everything he had built. The super freak hitmaker's addiction began during his early music career, initially using cocaine recreationally before it spiraled into a full-blown dependency that included heroin, crack cocaine, and various other substances that fueled his notorious lifestyle. James's drug use wasn't just personal recreation, it became the driving force behind increasingly erratic behavior that included violent incidents, sexual assault allegations, and multiple imprisonments. His addiction was so severe that he would disappear for days at a time, missing recording sessions, concerts, and business meetings that cost him millions in lost revenue and damaged relationships throughout the music industry. The physical toll was equally devastating, with James's health deteriorating rapidly as his tolerance demanded ever-increasing quantities of drugs. Multiple rehabilitation attempts failed to break the cycle of addiction that had consumed his life for decades. When James died in 2004, the coroner discovered 9 different drugs in his system, including cocaine, methamphetamine, and various prescription medications. 8. Ike Turner. Ike Turner's revolutionary contributions to rock and roll were tragically overshadowed by a cocaine addiction. So severe, it consumed 4 decades of his life and derailed one of music's most promising careers. Turner's relationship with drugs began in the 1960s, but escalated dramatically during the 1970s when cocaine became his drug of choice, leading to increasingly paranoid and violent behavior that destroyed his marriage to Tina Turner and alienated him from the music industry. His addiction was characterized by extreme binges that could last for days, during which Turner would become completely unreachable and unpredictable. These episodes led to numerous arrests, missed performances, and professional opportunities that slipped away as his reputation for unreliability grew. Turner cycled through rehabilitation programs more than a dozen times, each attempt offering brief hope before succumbing once again to the powerful grip of his addiction. The physical and mental toll of decades of cocaine abuse was evident in Turner's deteriorating health and increasingly erratic public appearances. Despite brief periods of sobriety where he attempted comebacks, the damage to his cardiovascular system and overall health was irreversible. Turner died in 2007 from a cocaine overdose, bringing a tragic end to the life of a music pioneer whose innovations helped create rock and roll, but whose addiction prevented him from enjoying the lasting success his talents deserved. 7. R. Kelly. R. Kelly's fall from R&B royalty to convicted criminal was fueled in part by a long-standing battle with substance abuse that enabled and exacerbated his predatory behavior. Court documents and testimonies revealed that Kelly regularly used cocaine, MDMA, Xanax, and marijuana, creating a chemical cocktail that lowered his inhibitions and intensified his already problematic relationship with control and power over others, particularly young women and girls. His addiction wasn't just recreational, it became a tool of manipulation and control within his inner circle and relationships. Kelly would allegedly provide drugs to victims and associates, creating dependencies that made it harder for them to leave his sphere of influence. This pattern of using substances to maintain power over others became a central element in the criminal enterprise that prosecutors successfully argued in court. The psychological effects of Kelly's long-term drug use manifested in increasingly grandiose and paranoid behavior, including the creation of elaborate recording compounds where he could control every aspect of his environment and the people within it. His addiction contributed to poor decision-making that led to mounting legal troubles, financial difficulties, and the eventual collapse of his career. When Kelly was finally convicted on multiple federal charges, his substance abuse history provided context for the systematic nature of his crimes and the devastating impact they had on numerous victims. 6. James Brown. The godfather of soul's legendary work ethic and explosive performances masked a decades-long struggle with drug addiction that created a pattern of erratic behavior, legal troubles, and declining health that overshadowed his musical achievements. Brown's addiction primarily involved cocaine and PCP, substances that seemed to amplify both his natural intensity and his tendency toward unpredictable, sometimes violent outbursts that became increasingly common throughout the 1980s and 1990s. His drug use manifested in bizarre public incidents, including a 1,988 high-speed police chase through Georgia and South Carolina that ended with Brown's arrest and imprisonment. These episodes revealed a man whose judgment was severely compromised by substance abuse, leading to multiple arrests for drug possession, domestic violence, and weapons charges that painted a troubling picture of his private life away from the stage. Despite numerous attempts at rehabilitation and periods of apparent sobriety, Brown's addiction proved persistent, contributing to deteriorating relationships with family members, bandmates, and business associates. The physical toll was evident in his later performances, where his once precise choreography and vocal control showed signs of the damage caused by years of substance abuse. Brown's death in 2006 was attributed to congestive heart failure and pneumonia, but those close to him understood that his long battle with addiction had weakened his body and contributed to his declining health in his final years. 5. Wilson Pickett. Wilson Pickett's transition from soul music legend to cautionary tale was marked by a destructive relationship with cocaine and alcohol that systematically dismantled both his career and personal life over several decades. Known for hits like Mustang Sally and In the Midnight Hour, Pickett's addiction began during the height of his success in the 1960s, but accelerated dramatically in the following decades, as changing musical tastes reduced his commercial viability. His substance abuse led to increasingly volatile behavior that made him difficult to work with, resulting in canceled recording sessions, missed performances, and damaged relationships with producers, musicians, and record labels. Pickett's addiction was particularly evident in his frequent run-ins with law enforcement, including arrests for drug possession, weapons charges, and assault allegations that painted a picture of a man whose judgment was severely compromised by his dependencies. The physical and professional deterioration was gradual but relentless, with Pickett's once powerful voice showing signs of damage from years of substance abuse and his reputation for unpredictability, making him increasingly unemployable in an industry that values reliability. Multiple attempts at rehabilitation failed to break the cycle of addiction that had consumed his life, and Pickett's final years were marked by financial difficulties, health problems, and isolation from the music community that had once celebrated his contributions. His death in 2006 was attributed to a heart attack, but those familiar with his struggles understood that his long battle with addiction had taken an irreversible toll. 4. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye's struggle with cocaine addiction was inextricably linked to his battles with depression, financial problems, and family dysfunction, creating a toxic combination that ultimately contributed to his tragic death at the hands of his father. Gaye's drug use intensified during the 1970s, as he grappled with the commercial and critical pressures of following up masterpieces like What's Going On and personal demons that included tax problems and bitter divorce from Anna Gordy. His addiction manifested in periods of creative paralysis, alternating with bursts of drug-fueled productivity, leading to erratic recording schedules and increasingly strained relationships with Motown Records and his collaborators. Gaye's cocaine use exacerbated his natural tendency toward paranoia and depression, creating a cycle where drugs temporarily relieved his emotional pain but ultimately intensified the underlying problems that drove him to use substances in the first place. The final phase of Gaye's life was marked by financial desperation, failed comeback attempts, and deteriorating relationships with family members who watched helplessly as addiction consumed the man they loved. His return to his parents' home in Los Angeles was intended as a fresh start, but his continued drug use and increasingly erratic behavior created unbearable tension with his father. On April 1, 1984, this tension erupted into violence that ended with Marvin Gaye Sr. fatally shooting his son, bringing a tragic conclusion to one of soul music's most tortured genius careers. 3. Frankie Lymon. Frankie Lymon's transformation from teenage sensation to heroin addict represents one of music history's most heartbreaking examples of talent destroyed by addiction at an impossibly young age. As the lead singer of Frankie Lymon, The Teenagers, he achieved international fame with Why Do Fools Fall in Love while still in his early teens, but the pressures of sudden success and exploitation by adults in the music industry created vulnerabilities that made him susceptible to drug experimentation. His introduction to heroin came during his late teens, initially as a way to cope with the stress of performing and the realization that his group's success was largely controlled by others who profited more from his talent than he did. The drug quickly transformed from occasional use to full-blown addiction, derailing his career just as he was transitioning from teenage novelty act to mature performer, leaving him unable to capitalize on his natural vocal abilities and charismatic stage presence. Lymon's addiction led to a downward spiral of failed comebacks, legal troubles, and deteriorating health that played out entirely in public view, making his struggle a cautionary tale for other young performers. Despite multiple attempts at rehabilitation and brief periods of sobriety where he showed flashes of his former brilliance, the grip of heroin addiction proved too strong. On February 27, 1968, Lymon was found dead in his grandmother's bathroom from a heroin overdose, dying at just 25 years old and leaving behind a legacy of what might have been had addiction not cut short his promising life. 2. David Ruffin. David Ruffin's departure from The Temptations marked the beginning of a solo career that was consistently undermined by a cocaine addiction that transformed one of Motown's most distinctive voices into an increasingly unreliable and erratic performer. Initially, Ruffin's drug use seemed manageable, but as his solo career failed to match the success he had enjoyed with The Temptations, his cocaine dependency intensified as a way to cope with professional disappointment and financial pressures. His addiction manifested in missed recording sessions, canceled performances, and increasingly bizarre behavior that made him difficult for record labels and promoters to work with, creating a cycle where reduced opportunities led to increased drug use, which further limited his professional prospects. Ruffin's cocaine abuse also affected his relationships with family and friends, as the drug's effects made him paranoid, aggressive, and unpredictable in ways that alienated the people who had supported him throughout his career. The final years of Ruffin's life were marked by desperate attempts to revive his career while battling an addiction that had consumed his resources and damaged his reputation beyond repair. Multiple rehabilitation attempts failed to provide lasting sobriety, and his performances became increasingly unreliable as his health deteriorated from years of substance abuse. On June 1, 1991, Ruffin died in Philadelphia from a cocaine overdose, ending the life of a performer whose distinctive voice had helped define the sound of Motown, but whose addiction prevented him from achieving the solo success his talents deserved. Michael K. Williams. Michael K. Williams's death in 2021 shocked fans who had watched him masterfully portray complex characters dealing with addiction and street life, not realizing that his performances were informed by his ongoing battle with substance abuse that began during his early acting career in New York. Williams was remarkably open about his struggles with cocaine, heroin, and other drugs, often crediting his recovery periods with giving him the emotional depth necessary to bring authenticity to roles like Omar Little in The Wire. His addiction was cyclical, with periods of sobriety allowing him to work consistently and build his reputation as one of television's most compelling character actors, followed by relapses that threatened both his career and his life. Williams understood the connection between his struggles and his professional success, often speaking about how his experiences with addiction informed his ability to portray characters caught in similar cycles of self-destruction and brief redemption. Despite multiple attempts at treatment and a support network that included fellow actors and recovery professionals, Williams continued to struggle with the same demons he portrayed on screen. His death from an accidental overdose involving fentanyl-laced heroin highlighted the ongoing opioid crisis and how even individuals with resources, talent, and awareness of addiction's dangers can fall victim to substances that have become increasingly dangerous due to synthetic additives. Williams's passing represented not just the loss of a gifted performer, but a reminder that addiction remains a persistent threat regardless of success, talent, or good intentions. These stories remind us that no amount of success can silence the pain someone carries inside. So now the question is, how many more untold battles are hiding behind Hollywood smiles? If this video opened your eyes, don't just scroll away. Hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that dig deeper than the headlines. And remember, behind every icon is a human story worth knowing.